You're watching the Power Hour. I'm your host, DJ Larry Jones, and today we'll be tackling a serious and important topic: high risk teens. This issue affects not only the teenagers themselves, but also their families, communities, and our society as a whole. It's a topic that requires our attention and solution. Joining me today is no stranger to the show. Please welcome Katie K. May. Katie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me into this conversation. It's so important.
Yes, it is. It is. Thank you for joining me and coming back on the show. Now, let's just jump right into it. When we say at risk teens, what do we mean?
The teens that I work with, so I can define it from that as a starting point, are typically self-harming, as in cutting themselves, burning themselves, have suicidal ideation, have acted on that suicidal ideation. Some of them also using substances, engaging in disordered eating behavior, but at risk meaning doing something that is life-threatening for them or self-destructive in some way.
Right. Now, how can we identify someone doing that type of stuff?
Yeah, so it's sneaky at first because oftentimes when someone's engaging in those kinds of behaviors, they're not telling everyone about it. It's a shameful behavior, but it's also intended to help them reduce really strong and painful emotions. So, what I would say is how we can identify a teenager who's engaging in these kinds of behaviors is to keep open communication about depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and to take action if your teen is telling you, I'm overwhelmed, I'm really sad, I can't handle this, rather than dismissing it as like, every teen struggles. I struggled when I was your age. This is typical. We want to pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. Now, like I said, behaviors change. Are there any particular, besides them being withdrawn,
Mhm.
are there any particular things we should look for as far as them cutting themselves? Do they wrap certain areas of their bodies, and what should we look for?
The signs can be subtle. I would say that most teenagers who are cutting in inconspicuous places, places where parents are not going to see it. It might be somewhere that's covered by a shirt. It might be on an ankle. I would say rather than over monitoring about are you cutting, the conversation really is like, how are you feeling? Are you able to cope with what life is throwing at you right now? But then also not being scared to say that, to ask the question, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you having thoughts about killing yourself? As parents, caregivers, professionals, we want to make sure that we're not uncomfortable asking those questions directly, because if we give off any scent that this is uncomfortable or I can't handle this, teen's not going to be honest because they're afraid that you can't handle it or that you're going to react poorly.
What do you think this comes from?
It comes from um, an emotion being too big for somebody to cope with. And so our brain goes to this place of escape. Even thinking about suicide provides an escape from emotion for people. So they've done brain scans where they've seen even the thought of it or the ideation brings an emotion down. And so when someone's experiencing an emotion that's too big, too painful, it's just not within their ability to cope, their brain comes up with a way to escape that. And sometimes that's a self-harm behavior, it's substance use to numb or remove that behavior, or it's some kind of suicidal behavior that really it's our brain coming up with a way to not experience the emotion that's in front of us.
Now, once we've identified the issue, the problem, how should we approach it?
Direct communication. I'm aware that you've been hurting yourself, and validation first. This must be so big and so painful for you if your reaction is to hurt yourself in some way. And I'm here for you and I want to listen and I want to make sure I understand what's led you to this point. Before we jump in with any kind of change, we want to make sure that we're understanding fully the painful experience that the teen is going through. Because again, if we don't do that, they're going to shut down and push away. But if we stay open, we can understand and then we can move into support. And there are lots of steps to that. I can share any of them. But the first step is always understanding and validation.
I was going to ask you that. When should parents start seeking professional help? At what point?
First signs of depression. Most primary care doctors at this point are doing depression screenings, and they'll tell you at annual checkups if a teen is meeting criteria for depression. At that point, I would say it is important to get them into therapy. But anytime you're noticing that for a stretch of a minimum 2 weeks that your teen is withdrawn more than usual, every teenager wants to be alone, but withdrawn more than usual, shutting down, having panic attacks, overwhelmed, tearful, making self-critical thoughts or making self-critical behaviors, statements about themselves, those are all signs that struggle is more than they can handle. It's not just typical teen moodiness.
Right. I want to get into trust,
Yeah.
developing trust between the child and the parent. What are some common challenges that parents face when trying to establish and maintain trust between them and their teens?
You know what? It's so hard because even if you have the best relationship with your teenager, developmentally, teens move away from parents and they share more with friends and they become more private because they're learning how to be an autonomous individual. And so, trust means being willing to sit there and not say anything, being willing not to push so hard, but also being honest and direct. I'm noticing that you're struggling. I'm noticing that every day after school, you go up to your room and you shut the door, and I can hear you crying, and I'm concerned about you, and I'm here for you, and I'm open to listening. And sometimes it's if teen isn't willing to go to therapy, it's parent going to therapy to learn the skills to respond to the teen. It's not just waiting until the teen is ready. So trust can mean a lot of things, but I think it means first and foremost listening and being willing to do what it takes on your end rather than putting the onus all on your teen to make changes.
Right. What do you think about now? Like, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. What do you think about nowadays? We don't eat dinner together. We
Mhm.
don't we don't sit down and talk at the dinner table or watch movies, have family movie night. I think that can be very effective in
Mhm.
keeping your teen where you want them to be, even though they are teens and they are going to have their own lives and they are going to do things that you'll probably never know about.
Yeah.
But just to keep them, right there where you need them to be.
Mhm.
How important is that?
I think it's super important. There's something that I call the hierarchy of connection. I talk about it in my book, and it's the different levels of connection that we can have with other people. And sometimes that's just being in the same room as that person. So, again, like building trust and building connection could be I'm putting away groceries, my teen is sitting on the couch and they're watching YouTube videos, but we're not arguing. We're in the same space together. And to your point, you're able to be there, you're able to see what they're doing, you're able to be around them. We can increase that level and we can do things that are interactive. Maybe we're watching a movie together and talking about how we liked it. Maybe we're playing a board game together. And the highest level of that hierarchy of connection is those interactive conversations, those deep talks, those abilities, the ability for you to listen and understand your teen. So I like what you're saying about the expectation isn't always that we're having these long, honest, deep talks, but we can still
Right.
spend time together with our teens in a way that is approachable for them, so it's not pushing them away.
Right. It's simply stuff like go to the movies, go to the mall. You know what I
Yep.
mean? But then again, you have that teen that says, "Oh, mom, dad, I don't want to hang out with you. You're too, you're so old."
Well, we are so old. It's managing your expectations. I think two things. One, some of my favorite times with my teen are driving in the car because I have them captured. I can have
Yeah.
conversations with them
Right.
when I'm bringing them to see their friends. And maybe it's a 5-minute drive to the movie theater, but I have a little bit of time where I can slip a conversation in there that's going to be meaningful. And the other thing is managing our grief as parents. It is developmentally typical for teenagers to move away from us, to not want to spend time with us.
Right.
And it's hard because we love them. We've watched them grow. They have needed us more in the past. And so acknowledging that that's a grieving process, but it's your process to manage and not to expect your teen to stay close to you or want to be your best friend because that's not healthy for them. They need to go out into the world and figure out who they are.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to communication, should we come down to their level, meet them where they are, or keep that parental level going? And how should we approach it when it comes to communication?
I'm a big fan of meeting someone where they're at, and I like to use something called radical genuineness, which is really being who you are in relation to your teen and who they are. Teenagers can sniff out inauthenticity a mile away. If you're trying too hard, they're going to roll their eyes at you. But if you can be
Right.
yourself and be genuine and be authentic because that's what you want from them, they're going to appreciate that the most. So it's not presenting with this authoritarian standpoint that's going to make them see you in a dynamic that's not helpful when you want to build trust and connection. It's coming to the conversation, being willing to meet them where they are.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Now, let's do worst case scenario. Let's say something happens between a parent and child where the child has lost the trust for the parent. How can that be regained?
I actually see this happen all the time. So I work with many families who, because the parent is so worried about the teen, they're reading their text messages, they're reading their diary, they're tracking them without the teen knowing. And those are behaviors that breach trust. And I want to uphold that it comes from a place of parent really being worried about their teen, but not having the skills to be able to talk about it or approach them. But if that trust is breached, we want to repair harm. And that's the same way we would do in any relationship, is acknowledging that you caused harm, apologizing for causing harm, and then doing something differently with your actions and not just saying the words. So if in the past you have read your teen's diary, making sure that in the future you're knocking and waiting for an answer before you enter their teen's room, or letting them know, hey, today I have to go in and put your clothes away. Do you want to be in there with me? You're rebuilding trust, and you're not doing it in a way that's walking on eggshells with your teen. You're doing it in a way that's saying, hey, I care about you and I acknowledge that I hurt you and I want to rebuild this trust with you.
Okay. Now, a teenager is his or her behavior is so bad that they need to be institutionalized at a hospital. When it gets to that point, they're in there for, however many long days or weeks. Coming home.
Yeah.
What's that about? How should we deal with that? Should we ease in with them, or how should we handle them?
I have so many strong feelings about this, which I think you're already aware of. So in the first place, sending a teen to the hospital should be only if you are unable to keep them safe or manage the behaviors at home. Working with a therapist who knows how to manage those high-risk behaviors in an outpatient setting is preferable, because what happens is we send teens to the hospital, they get a break. Parents also get a break because they're not thinking all the time, is my teen okay? Is my teen safe? But then they come back into a life where all the same triggers and stressors are happening. So we want to be really mindful of when is it necessary and when is it not necessary. That's first. Then coming out of the hospital, we want to make sure that there's a plan to keep teens safe without over monitoring, without punishing, without invading privacy, because you're going to find yourself back in the same place. So for example, when I used to work in an inpatient hospital setting, I'd have parents who would say, you're not going to be allowed to have a bedroom door because I can't trust you. You're going to hurt yourself. So that's not necessarily changing behavior patterns. That's just over monitoring. That's creating hospital at home rather than creating new healthy patterns. So what we want to do is make sure that there's a solid plan for communication, a common language for talking about safety risk. I recommend some kind of rating scale, and a good therapist who's going to help to manage those high-risk behaviors in the home and outpatient setting, rather than just this revolving door of hospitalizations.
Right. So a couple of bullet points before we close. Number one, do not be so intrusive when it comes to their, invading their space. Do you have some more bullet points for us?
Don't be so intrusive. Build trust by having open communication. Give what you want to get. If you want to see your teen talk to you, be what parents call respectful to you, you need to be able to give that to them. It's not a one-way street, and teens really value your willingness to be honest with them, to be genuine with them, and to show them that you see them as their own person and not just some extension of you, not like the grabber that people use at the grocery store to reach things on the top shelf. That's not your child. Your child is a separate person.
Right. There you go. Katie K. May always comes by and she drops knowledge on how to deal with family situations. I appreciate you so much. You're watching the Power Hour right here on Soul TV. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I was Katie K. May.
Emma, remember when you saw the scratches on my arm while we were driving to school this morning? I told you it was from our stupid cat. I know you knew I was lying. You always know when I'm lying. Overpowering emotions combined with a lack of coping skills has led me to self-harm, which has provided a false sense of relief. Now cutting my arms has become a compulsive behavior. Can you help me figure out the best way to navigate our parents and find treatment?